Welcome back to Systematic Theology 1. This is Unit 2. I'm glad to hear you survived that almost unbearable amount of work that we had in Unit 1. But seriously though, during the last unit, we defended the need for Christian theology. And I made a case, hopefully compelling for you, that Christian theology is needed in every area of ministry, regardless of whether you become a professional theologian, you're a pastor, or a layman. Systematic theology is very valuable and very important. And in this unit, we want to define Christian theology and talk about its particular functions. And I would suggest that I have written a book along these lines called In Defense of Doctrine, which was a reworking of my doctoral dissertation. And I happen to think it's a very interesting book, a wee bit technical in some places, a book that would probably make a great Christmas present for all members of your immediate family, and maybe distant relatives, maybe some friends, maybe a random person you meet on the street, whatever. My kid needs to eat. The book is available on Amazon, but in it I make a lot of this, what I'm going to talk about here in this section and what we talk about in the notes, a little bit clearer. Basically, we are going to be making the case here that systematic theology is something that we need in a contemporary context to move from the Bible, which is an ancient text, to present-day setting. We have a different set of questions that we're trying to ask or trying to answer that ancient peoples weren't dealing with, and systematic theology has a way of bridging the ancient world to the contemporary setting. So here's my definition of systematic theology, and it's in the notes that I'm going to provide for you in this unit. And this is sort of a long definition, but I think it's a good, meaty, exhaustive definition of what I think systematic theology should be. Systematic theology is the uniquely Christian discipline of critical reflection on the attributes and activities of the triune God revealed in the Bible and in nature and history, in order that we may formulate a comprehensive, robust Christian worldview, a vision that encompasses who God is, who we are, and how we are supposed to live in this world as disciples of Jesus Christ. So let's talk about that definition for just a moment. First and foremost, systematic theology is a Christian discipline. We're not talking about Jewish theology. We're not talking about Islamic theology. We're not talking about Buddhist theology. We're talking specifically here about Christian theology. And it entails critical reflection. Critical reflection doesn't mean the word critical in a sense of negative reflection. What it means is a kind of reflection that involves deep thinking, analyzing what we're seeing, analyzing what we're reading, analyzing what we believe in order that we may refine it and make it better. So systematic theology is Christian, and it requires critical reflection as well. But it's critical reflection on something in particular. It's critical reflection on the attributes, that is, the qualities or characteristics, and the activities of the triune God revealed in the Bible and in nature and history. So we're talking first and foremost about God, but not just about who God is, but what God has done in bringing this world into being, what God does in relationship to His creatures that He loves. And the Bible, of course, is the primary source for all Christian theology. The Bible is the supreme source of authority in the life of the Christian believer and in the formation of Christian doctrine. But God also has revealed Himself in other areas like nature and in history, areas that we will get to when we talk about general revelation. But we do all of this. We engage in the Christian discipline of critical reflection on what God is like and what God does in order that we will formulate a comprehensive Christian worldview. A Christian worldview is basically the way a Christian sees the world. And this is a sort of vision for life, something that's precognitive, something that we live from, we act from, something that just basically tells us a lot about who we are. And this Christian worldview that systematic theology is trying to train people to have is a vision that encompasses who God is, who we are, and how we are supposed to live in this world as disciples of Jesus Christ. So we're not simply talking about something theoretical here, although there's a lot of theory that we will be discussing. But it's theory that should drive our practice. This should change us. This should direct us in a way in which we live our lives to glorify and honor Jesus Christ. So that's basically what we're going to be addressing in this unit. So good things ahead, exciting things ahead. So in addition to this definition and exploring these various ways that people have defined theology, we'll also explore the differences between systematic theology and what is called biblical theology, historical theology, and philosophical theology. Systematic theology sort of attempts to marry all of these distinct doctrines or all these distinct practices in theology. We will also, in this unit, discuss the differences between what we call essential Christian beliefs, those things that every person must believe in order to be a Christian, those beliefs that make up a local church or denomination, and these things might be issues like baptism or church polity, and things that Christians, even in a local church, can agree to disagree about. If they have a different theological perspective on a particular passage or a different theological framework, these are issues that, while they're important, they're not necessarily crucial for Christian fellowship, and we can agree to disagree on those. And so, along those lines, I've included here in this unit an article by Dr. Al Mohler, the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, called the Need for Theological Triage, in which he explores this particular idea of doctrinal taxonomy in detail. So it's a very important article, one that I would encourage every single pastor, every single minister of every stripe to read, something that is of crucial importance for what we're doing in Christian theology. And then finally, we'll close this unit talking about the role that worldview and contextualization plays in Christian theology. Now again, we've already talked about worldview. Worldview is a basic lens through which you see the whole world. But contextualization, which is basically a fancy $3 word meaning adapting the Christian message to a particular context, is also important. It's a term that missiologists use when they're planning and strategizing for missions in a particular context, but it's something that theologians use to talk about addressing the specific milieu in which we do Christian theology. And Christian theology in the early 21st century is different from Christian theology in the late 19th century, in that we have different cultural and philosophical concerns that we're trying to address. In the late 19th century, early 20th century, the prevailing intellectual school was modernism. And now we work and play in really what we call a postmodern context, where things have gone from this sort of hard Enlightenment, scientific sort of worldview to this sort of cultural relativism that's so predominant in our own setting. And so theology is one of these never-ending sort of jobs. I mean, there's no perfect systematic theology that could be written that would address every point in time, which is good for me because it means job security. There's always a need for a new systematic theology, and it's good news for systematic theologians in the future, because systematic theology in the early 21st century will not be like systematic theology in the late 21st century or in the 22nd century, so on and so forth. It's not that the gospel message changes. It's not that the scripture changes. It's not that the content of doctrine changes all that much. It's that we always are working to appropriate the content to new settings and the new challenges that we face. And sometimes what we have to do is we have to make explicit things that are implicit, or articulate things that biblical authors never would have been able to predict. I mean, I don't think that when the Apostle Paul was sitting down to write Romans 1, he could have predicted that we would have Bruce and Caitlyn Jenner in the 21st century. I mean, what are Christians to do with transgender issues? What are Christians to do with issues related to gay marriage, to abortion, to stem cell research, to cloning? I mean, these are all things that are new to our context, and there will be new issues in the future to come. But the key that we're going to talk about, at least in this unit, is being able to contextualize appropriately. So, for this week, here are your assignments. You want to read the weekly assignments from the textbooks. Also, read that great article by Dr. Moeller. There are some lecture notes that you want to pay attention to, and there is a quiz on theological method that will be related to the notes and the reading that you've had thus far. See you in Unit 3.